Our last conversation with the quote atheist experience, I wanted to share something that was perhaps a whole lot more simpler than what I was sharing the week before. But unfortunately, because their minds there have been made up to run and to deny in whatever which ways that they possibly can the truth, even when it has been displayed right in front of them. We're going to see segments of a conversation before mine where they are speaking to a gentleman by the name of Moses, and they keep telling Moses that they're looking for scientific evidence and that he just keeps trying to talk about stories. And then you'll see that when we present scientific evidence, all they want to do at that point is speak about stories. Now, of course, ultimately, there are no coincidences. And as it happened, I did not watch the introduction to the show, which, as you're about to see, directly coincided with what it is that I'm sharing. As the diet described in Genesis 129 is scientifically proven to have medical benefits, as you're seeing here. And when I share this information, they completely forget about their own introduction to the show and, of course, begin to play dumb. So, without further ado, we'll begin with the introduction to this show.
Says, "Is anyone among you sick? Let them call the elders of the church to pray over them and anoint them with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayers offered in faith will make the sick person well." Many Christians who believe the Bible is the inspired word of God understand this as a call to use prayer instead of medicine. Unfortunately, this has proven fatal for tens of thousands of children whose parents literally get away with killing their kids through medical neglect. How do they get away with it, I hear you asking? Well, Christians have passed laws creating exemptions to manslaughter and even murder charges as long as the killer denied medical care to their kids in the name of faith healing. If you think that God grants prayers, or if you think I don't understand what the Bible says about prayer, we'd love to hear from you. Give us a call because the show is starting now.
Now, here we'll get right into the beginning of our call.
We've got Landy at the top of the queue who says that from Florida, exactly, him, wants to show biblical texts have a scientific proof they are true. Okay, so evidence, in other words, scientific proof. Let's see if this person can present evidence.
Now, as you just heard him say, let's see if this person can present evidence. And then you'll see as soon as we do, the track meet begins.
Is Landy there?
Hello, Landy?
Have we moved him up yet? Oh, let me click on it. There we go. All right, Landy, are you there?
I am. Genesis
All right.
129. Thank you. Genesis 129 outlines a vegan vegetarian diet, and Elizabeth Blackburn won a Nobel Prize proving that such diets are able to actually turn off genes which cause chronic disease and turn on genes which prevent them. Her particular study spanned only 3 months and showed a change of 500 genes within that 3 months. And this is clearly showing particularly to be a part of the answer to increasing mutational load.
So here, as scientific evidence is being presented, I give them a moment to, of course, pull up the passage in particularly which I was speaking of. And instead of directly addressing a passage having direct scientific evidence in indeed being valid, they begin to put their track shoes on, as you will see here.
Particularly to be a part of the answer to increasing mutational load, which, I'm sorry, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I did have a question.
Yeah, can you tell me what passage that was again? Genesis 1 what?
He said 119, I believe. Is that what you said? Am I correct? Are you on a speakerphone? I'm having trouble hearing you. If you're on a speakerphone, you need to take it off so our listeners can hear you.
No problem. It is Genesis 129.
129. Thank you. So I misheard that.
Of course.
I'm going to read it. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit and seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth and the birds in the sky and all the creatures that move on the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. Okay, so we've got this book that says a thing.
Now here we'll stop for a moment to analyze the psychology, not just when it comes to this person who's speaking right now, but how they try to frame or direct the thinking of any other person, as they immediately try to minimize what was just demonstrated to them, saying, we have this book, as if he forgot what it was that we were talking about to begin with, to then saying, that says a thing. And in his frightened, frantic running, obviously must have forgot his own introduction to this quote show. But here we'll continue.
I give you every seed-bearing plant and every tree that has fruit with seed in it, and they will be yours for food. So basically any plant that has seeds. So I understand your first assertion that is a theoretical diet.
It is indeed. As a matter of fact, you can also pull up that there are Orthodox Jews, for example, that hold a...
Well, hold on. We're sticking with the evidence first. I just want to make sure here.
We wanna...
So that is theoretically a diet. A diet is a set of foods that you should eat, right? So is your argument that is the only thing that God wants you to eat? Like that this is some sort of instruction, or is this just a list of some things that you can eat?
That is an instruction. As a matter.
Okay, why do you think it's an instruction?
Continue. Yes, because the only eating of meat, for example, I also said extra biblical text when I was speaking to Jonathan during the screening, excuse me. But Jubilees, it also states that during the flood, that is when particularly God gave permission to eat flesh. And there are also holdings such as called the 10 utterances of creation held by Orthodox Jews.
I got it. My question was, how do we know that that's an instruction, or why is that an instruction? So who is giving the instruction?
Well, it's you read it out in Genesis 1:29. For you it shall be for food.
I read a book that a man wrote. Who is giving this instruction, though?
Excuse me, that a man wrote? Yes.
A human wrote the Bible, correct? A human put ink on the page, correct?
Correct.
In fact, Genesis wasn't even ink on the page at first. Genesis was either bronze or Iron Age oral tradition first, and then later put down as ink on page. Is that correct?
That's not correct. As a matter of fact, the most ancient religious text that you'll find actually is in hieratic on pyramid walls, which is actually found to be the original Hebrew. You will actually find that there are holdings that throughout the dead.
Wait. Slow down.
Let's back up.
So you're telling me that there's parts of the Bible in Egypt that are the oldest parts of the Bible. And they predate the Bronze Age.
Predates the Bronze Age, correct. A professor.
Okay, do you know when the Bronze Age was?
Excuse me, it predated both the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, sir. It happened exactly.
Herein specifically, I mentioned both ages because, as you'll remember, The previous person speaking, who goes by cross-examiner, stated either the Bronze or the Iron Age.
Genesis was either Bronze or Iron Age, or.
And after this person, Kelly, was, I suppose, hoping to catch someone and not knowing when the Bronze Age was, it appears that he lost hold that his partner here mentioned both ages, and I was addressing that the holdings of Genesis is older than both ages. And though this person, Kelly, lost track of that, you will also hear me in the background saying, of course, when he mentions that the Bronze Age came before the Iron Age.
Well, if it had to predate the Iron Age, if it predated the Bronze Age, because the Bronze Age came first. Do you know? Excuse Landy. Landy, stop for a minute. Landy, please stop for a minute. We're having a really difficult time hearing what you're saying. You either need to get off the speakerphone or put your mouth closer to the microphone, because you keep fading out and we're not hearing what you're saying. Okay. Now, what I'm wondering is, do you know when the Bronze Age was, so that you know that these writings in Egypt actually predate the Bronze Age as you are claiming?
These writings, when you look it up, is going to reflect to be the oldest pyramid, the oldest religious text available. The two oldest forms of writing.
Well, no,
that's
not true. I
asked.
can tell you that right now. The oldest texts we have are Sumerian. They're Akkadian,
no, it's
actually.
not. When you look it up,
yes, it is. Yes, it is. Go look it up. Yes, it is. Landy, yes, it is. They are Akkadian, from Akkad, in the lower part of of Mesopotamia. Go look it up.
Yeah, I think that
that's where writing was invented in cuneiform.
Yeah, and the point here.
And as you are reading here, of course, Kelly was incorrect. Archaeologists have found writings just as early as the earliest writings from Sumer, as you just read here. Furthermore, you so far have heard nothing combative on my part. In fact, as you go back through, I have been rather kind throughout this entire conversation, to say the least. But after the experience, quote unquote, no pun intended, that I had last week with Armin and Elliot, hoping to steer one and cut me off, which was also already happening during this phone call as well. Cross-examiner will go on to say here that he's trying to understand me and have a conversation, but yet earlier you already heard him use the word argument, already framing what I am stating as an argument, not a conversation, as he tries to, in an attempt of a sly way, trying to mask it with some sort of mock kind salesman-like demeanor.
So is that is your argument that is the...
Next, he's going to say that I questioned that in essence a person wrote the Genesis passage which I called in to speak in regards to. After you hear him state that I questioned that, I'm going to play what actually happened, and you are going to hear me clarify what I heard, as there was some feedback back and forth, not just for them, as they continuously wanted to make clear. And then you will hear me say yes, and then I continue on to repeat that is correct.
Getting back to the broader point is, you questioned whether I said a man wrote the Bible, right? I read a book that a man wrote. Who is giving this instruction, though?
Excuse me, that a man wrote? Yes.
A human wrote the Bible, correct? A human put ink on the page, correct?
Correct.
In fact,
so with that being cleared up, we'll continue on now.
Getting back to the broader point is, you questioned whether I said a man wrote the Bible, right? That's my point, is we know that, I mean, you look up in most study Bibles, right? They will say Genesis was an oral tradition before it was written down. So we have humans making up stories, maybe inspired by God or not, but writing them down. So somebody wrote something down at some point. My question was, if the Bible contains instructions, who's actually giving the instructions? Was it the person that wrote it down or came up with the story, or is it somebody else?
Again, later on in this quote conversation, you're going to hear him say that he's trying to have a conversation, trying to understand, not trying to argue and make assertions. And you've just heard him say that we have humans making up stories. Once more, wanting to project some sort of clean-cut, mild-mannered demeanor, however, mocking in the same exact moment, and trying his best to frame things as he would like to, versus actually trying to understand, as you'll hear very soon him claim that he was trying to do. Now, me getting a feel for what it is that I'm talking to now, things begin to take a turn now. However, it being quite frankly stupid to ask me if those who originally wrote down Genesis were the ones giving the instruction, or quote, someone, somebody else, is just flat out stupid. So, me giving the benefit of the doubt that he mentioned earlier, inspired by God, I give him a chance to clarify that question a little closer, being as that I understand this information is not just completely solid, but quite heavy for someone who didn't know anything about it, all of a sudden now doing so. And as you're about to hear, I ask him to repeat it very kindly still.
Excuse me, could you repeat that one more time?
My original question was, because you objected to my use of the word man when I talked about who wrote the Bible, and I'm trying to explain what I meant. The Genesis particularly comes from oral traditions and then eventually was written down. So that's what I was explaining by written by man, the physical act of writing these stories down. My question then is, you characterized Genesis, the dietary plan, so to speak, as a set of instructions. And I asked, who gave us those instructions? Was it the person who was writing it down, or was it somebody else? Who is giving us those instructions?
Thank you. First of all, I did not object to a man writing anything, or a woman for that matter, writing
let's
anything.
Skip that. I'm fine. I don't care if you objected.
Now, as you hear, as I was being rudely interrupted again, I said, excuse me, I'm going to continue with the answer, and then I was muted, as you hear me just cut off after that. And then he continues to try to frame this conversation and simply state he doesn't care if I objected, which one more time.
That a man wrote. Who is giving this instruction, though?
Excuse me, that a man wrote? Yes.
A human wrote the Bible, correct? A human put ink on the page, correct?
Correct.
In fact,
thank you. First of all, I did not object to a man writing anything, or a woman for that matter, writing anything.
Skip that. I'm fine. I don't care if you objected. Let's fine. Skip that. I understand that. Who is giving us those instructions in Genesis?
Yes. There is a professor by the name of Wiseman.
Is there a reason that you, I'm going to mute you. Is there a reason that you will not answer this question? It was a very, very clear question. I've asked it 4 times already. And I have to wonder why you won't just answer it, because it's probably a 1-word answer, maybe a 2-word answer. But could you tell me one more time, who is giving us these instructions?
Yes, thank you. The written instruction, as was displayed by a Professor Wiseman, it's called the tablet.
Okay, I've muted you again. Maybe I'm not using the right words. When I say giving, I don't mean like somebody presented them as evidence or at a speech. I'm talking about the idea that one should do something. An instruction is a directions to somebody to say, this is what you should do to accomplish some goal. That's what an instruction is. If you want to assemble this furniture, get your Allen wrench out and follow the IKEA diagrams. Those are instructions. If you want to go to heaven, follow these rules. Those are instructions. But a person or an entity is telling us those instructions. So what was the original source? What mind came up with those instructions and delivered them to us? That's my question. So can you answer that?
Thank you very much. I was actually answering you. They were passed down from...
Okay, I'm muting you again. That's a very passive-aggressive way to do that. You were not answering me.
I actually was answering him directly, which ultimately is what he's concerned with. These children at the quote atheist experience only try to place your presentations or your answers into their own little boxes, hoping to lead you back into something that they are comfortable with. Once more, in the previous call before mine, they were stating that the gentleman they were speaking to, that went by Moses, only made assertions about quote stories without any scientifically based evidence. And here I was giving the scientifically based evidence along with what my answer is, which these boys here, trying hard to quote maintain control of this conversation, hoping to direct the flow of it into something that would lead into some quote aha moment of theirs, which is never going to come, as what I am sharing is indeed the truth. And you'll also notice that they're still asking me about these quote stories and have not addressed anything in regards to the scientific basis of it whatsoever, which is what they acted like they were originally looking for.
We've got Landy at the top of the queue who says, wants to show biblical texts have a scientific proof they are true. Okay, so evidence, in other words, scientific proof. Let's see if this person can present evidence.
And to be clear, this quote tablet theory is just one stream of evidence which supports the preservation and passing down of this history and this instruction. And as you see here, though it is listed, at least by Wikipedia, as a hypothesis, this tablet theory is indeed defined as a theory of the authorship and composition of the book of Genesis. Again, this is defined as a theory even by the site which just listed it as a hypothesis. Now, as you saw earlier, I gave scientific evidence proving that the scripture which I shared is indeed proven to be correct, and that instruction is indeed optimum when it comes to our bodies. And as soon as I did that, they wanted to get into storytelling and in essence trying to run away, not wanting to state that indeed they see that it is true. Now here we're going to see a little bit of the call before mine, where indeed they are complaining of the opposite being the case. And also state, just as I was interrupted from doing, that the evidence needs to be presented along with what it is indeed that you are trying to share. Exactly as he tried to interrupt me from doing.
I want to define some terms first, because I think you're about to give me an argument and not evidence. Do you understand the difference between an argument and evidence?
I'm going to give you evidence. I'm going to give you...
Okay, what data do you have? What measurements have you taken, and what data do you have that you'd like to present?
Okay, so here we go. You said to use the Bible, right? But like
No, I did not say to
No,
use the
we didn't
Bible.
say that.
No.
We said we wanted evidence.
I said
And-
you
and
you
I
said
would-
you were going to present evidence, and I said, great, let's present the evidence, and then tell me why that evidence supports a belief in the Bible. But I would like for you to present the evidence, and evidence comes in the form of measurements, observations, data, not
right.
reasoning and argument. So I just wanted to define those terms. So I would love to hear your best evidence that, let's say, something in the Bible is true. Not tell me about the Bible, but
Now here you just heard him say, not tell me about the Bible. He just wanted to hear the evidence that validates whatever scripture it is, which is the subject in the moment, versus our conversation where he had the evidence directly and none of them could do anything to oppose it, to deny it, or to refute it. So he then just wants to talk about the Bible, which he is saying here he doesn't want to do. He's just looking for proof of validity. And here they go on with more of the same.
tell me, here's the evidence, and that proves that the Bible's true.
Story is what moves on, what lives in our heart, right? Because it takes place in our minds and our hearts, all these stories, right? So when you guys are looking for physical evidence of, oh, where was Jesus? So I need to find his evidence in a dark cave. These are stories that we go through mentally, right? Because when we're slaves to this world, we're mentally.
You know, the Three Little Pigs is just a story we go through mentally too. You're not giving me any evidence by saying these are just stories. It's not giving evidence.
Yeah,
You offered to give us evidence. Let's stick to that. Where's your evidence?
Right. Let's cut the preamble. We all agree. We understand the history of the Bible. We all understand the nature.
Now here you see this quote cross-examiner at one point says that we all understand the history of the Bible. And then of course, as you just saw, when he's actually presented, when he's actually faced with actual evidence, with actual proof, he wants to go back into the history of the Bible, as you saw within our conversation. Also known as these cowards decided to run. Now, before we get back to our conversation, here's a little bit more of that previous call and a little more of these pretenders doing the exact same thing.
Of storytelling and verbal tradition, oral tradition, I should say. Let's cut all that. Most of our listeners are very familiar with it. Tell us what the evidence is.
Once more, now he just stated that most of their listeners are familiar with the history of the Bible, but tried to use that very same thing he complained about as an avenue of escape when it came to our conversation, like a dishonest, lying pretender. Very cowardly, very distasteful.
And that's your evidence? Abraham was the father of faith? That's the evidence?
Can I speak? Like, please.
No, because you said you were going to get right to the evidence. You said yourself, I will get right to the evidence. And then you started talking about Abraham. So, I mean, are you going to get to the evidence?
Let me model how a person who is genuinely interested in collecting evidence would present an answer to some sort of question. If somebody says, how do we know how old the universe is or the earth is? We wouldn't start with a story of, well, there's stories about the earth. No, they would start off by saying something like, well, we have X percent. We've measured X percent of lead in the earth, and lead only comes about through radioactive decay, which has a half-life of this. Therefore, the earth is this old. Like, you can just get straight to the evidence. And the reason I'm pointing out and modeling this answer is I find that anytime you ask for evidence and somebody says, well, I have to tell a story first, it means they don't have evidence, which is why we interrupted you. And this time, give us your best evidence that supports your belief in God.
Okay, the evidence I'm about to give is the story of God in our current lives.
All right, I guess you're not interested in evidence.
So now getting back to our conversation, where we left off, I was not only answering in regards to how this information and instruction was passed down, but also giving scientific evidence as to why it was not just oral tradition, as he stated numerous times now. He then, as you're about to see, in a very coy, snarky manner, goes on to state that I may be stating that this quote professor wrote Genesis like an idiot, especially being that, as you have seen, he has continuously muted me and has not fully heard anything that I have been saying. And the only times I've mentioned a professor was in regards to the professor who determined that there were ultimately Hebrew inscriptions on pyramid walls, and the only other time was in regards to the tablet theory, which I was about to share, as at least just one stream of evidence beyond this quote oral tradition.
You were telling a story about some professor, and I don't think that you're telling me, and maybe I'm wrong, that some professor wrote Genesis. So one more time, just tell me the name, just tell me a person, no story, no snarkiness. I'm genuinely trying to understand you. If you watch our show, we are genuinely trying to understand. So please.
And as you literally just saw from the previous conversation, that is the last thing that this pretender is being. The last thing that he is genuine. Literally, after just giving such a snark remark, such as a professor writing Genesis, the idiot then turns around and says, no snarkiness though. This is the literal absurdity that you deal with this quote atheist experience. Pretenders just trying to mute you, blot you out, try to only give their perspective, and then run when faced with actual evidence. Literally, like the cowards that they are.
Just answer the question. We've been talking to you now for quite a while. Who gave us those instructions?
I just said that they were passed down from Adam and Eve to Enoch on down. And
okay, so the instructions come from Adam and Eve?
Go ahead.
Hold on. So I want to understand. Sorry? Was it Adam or was it Eve who gave us the instruction on what to eat?
So now all your viewers are hearing you ask me if I was there to...
Okay, so I don't think he understands the question, and you're again not answering the question. You said Adam and Eve. Are you saying that Adam and Eve wrote Genesis, like came up with those ideas and then passed those ideas down? Or was it somebody else that came up with those ideas? I.e., let's cut to the chase. Let's cut to the chase. Hold on. Let's cut to the chase. Do those instructions come from God?
Of course.
Well, why didn't you say so? Why didn't you say so? I asked that question 6 times. Because you asked me if a human being wrote it down. Because you asked me if a human being wrote it down. No, I didn't. And
so now here, as you just saw, either we are dealing with flat out liars or they are delusional. Let's go over that little part one more time.
Didn't you say so?
Because
I asked that question 6 times.
If a human being wrote it down. Because you asked me if a human being wrote it down.
No, I didn't. And a human wrote the Bible, correct? A human put ink on the page, correct?
So let me know, do you think we're dealing with just flat out liars here or flat out delusion here when it comes to them both? Also, do not forget that they began this show speaking of medical benefits when it comes to illnesses, and they have completely ran away from the medical benefits that have been proven scientifically through following the diet outlined in Genesis 1:29. This is the type of utter weakness and classlessness that you are dealing with when it comes to these cowards over at the quote atheist experience.
Didn't you say so?
Because
I
you
asked that
me if a
question
human
6
being
times.
wrote it down. Because you asked me if a human being wrote it down.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. And a human wrote the Bible, correct? A human put ink on the page, correct? This, Kelly, is a very common problem when you start getting into these discussions, that people don't understand how to actually actively listen to what you're asking them. A human wrote the Bible, correct? A human put ink on the page, correct? So I asked that question 6 times. Because you asked me if a human being wrote it down. Because you asked me if a human being wrote it down. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. And I pointed out that a human originally wrote them down. And then I asked, but who actually came up with those instructions? I hope you see the difference, right? Who wrote them down, my point was, is irrelevant. The real question is that you are claiming that God is telling us that this is what we should do. Do I understand you correctly?
First of all, who pertains to a human being? At first you said, did a human do it? And now you're bringing up God. Who pertains to a human being, as all your viewers heard you? And Genesis
I don't understand your
1:29 was
question.
scientifically backed.
I don't understand the question. Could you rephrase it so I could understand it?
You just said who. Who pertains to a human being? And now you're bringing up God. But
so are you saying that when somebody says who created the universe and who controls the universe and who decides to go to heaven and hell, that doesn't pertain to a God?
They need to clarify it, because that's the hole you were hoping I would step into, asking if a human is God or not.
I think you're looking for us to trap you, and that's not what's happening.
We're not. Here. I'm literally just trying to get you to
your questions to trap you.
I just want to cut short the conversation and get to your main point, which is that you believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that God is telling us in the Bible, gave us instructions to eat a certain diet. That's all I'm walking you through. Like, I've got you on a witness stand and I'm just asking you questions. And I agree, Kelly, you're looking for traps. All I'm trying to do is understand your position so that I can then see if I have any objections to it.
One more time, speaking of understanding to see if there are any objections to it. As we saw earlier, they just wanted evidence. They didn't want to hear anything in regards to the history of the Bible, as per the previous call with Moses. In regards to any objections, they have asked nothing in regards to the scientific evidence which proves what I put forward as correct. One more time, we have a liar on the spot trying to dance as best as it can. And do not forget, Kelly just stated that he thinks I'm looking for a trap. This is after him asking the nonsense if I knew when the Bronze Age was, when what I stated was that the oldest religious text in the world or on the pyramid walls to date, as I displayed earlier, as a fact.
So do I understand your position correctly? God gave us instructions to eat the things listed in the section of Genesis you cited.
The way you just framed it right there is indeed my position, as well as it is scientifically backed, which you have not questioned and you will not be able to refute.
Now I'll rewind it in a moment, just so you can watch this coward's face in regards to the reaction of what I said once more, pointing out that yes, indeed, that is my position. Once more, it is scientifically backed, and there is absolutely nothing he can do to refute it. He now goes on to again try to resort to another string of lies and state that this is the kind of call that he doesn't like, ultimately because it wasn't like the call before, which he claimed he didn't want, and because ultimately these children aren't in control of anything, let alone me, regardless how quickly they think they can press mute. Once more, time itself tells all truth by the grace of God. Now you're going to literally hear them after this little runaround, this song and dance. You're going to literally hear them indeed admit, yes, it is good, as of course that instruction of course would be, as of course God is good. And then you're going to hear them ask, well, what can we infer from this diet? When I already shared its effects against chronic diseases already, though of course there is much more. Once more, they themselves overlooking, or purposely so, how this correlates to their own introduction to this quote show.
Yeah, I really, I used to be a fan of this show for many years before becoming a host. And this was the type of call that I really didn't enjoy, because it's obvious that this person is coming in with animosity, right?
With a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah,
yes.
they're not interested in genuine dialogue. It's like, I want to rush to this other point rather than just genuinely having a conversation so we can clearly understand each other and then get to the meat of the disagreement. This call could have gone very differently. It could have been, hey guys, I think that God instructed us to eat this diet, and there's scientific evidence that that diet is beneficial. What can we conclude from that? That's the conversation. Am I getting this wrong, Kelly?
That's what I thought.
Okay.
And
so
and let's say all of that is real, right? God did tell us we should be eating a vegetarian diet in the Bible, and then we find out later, in thousands of years later, however many it is, that a vegan diet is pretty healthy. What is that telling us?
Yeah, that's where we want to
First of
go,
all, I
Landy.
like
We're
the
not
way-
trying to be mean or to trick. We're genuinely trying to understand where you're getting, but we have to walk through the points to make sure we're not missing anything. So do we understand what you're saying, that A, God gave us instruction to eat this particular type of diet, and B, we now have evidence that eating that type of diet can be medically beneficial? Are those two things what you're saying?
Thank you very much, guys. And yes, it is. That's correct.
Okay. So I think, Kelly, you had raised the point of not to be snarky about it, but so what is sort of.
First of all, this tongue-in-cheek little punk is not only being snarky about it by saying so what, but now these fools have to run back into that scientific wall that they tried to run from, and as if they have caught Alzheimer's all of a sudden, are asking me, what can we infer from this information? Which, again, is what I began with answering, before they began running to what they asked the angel in the previous conversation not to do.
The question that you go to in science, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
okay,
I don't
what does
want to be
that tell
snarky.
us?
What I'm asking is, what do we infer from this knowledge that we put together here? What's the inference? What is your point?
Well, for example, there is a scientific fact which is called increasing mutational overload, which actually shows the human gene.
Okay. We get it. A vegan diet is better. Okay, we get.
So here, they have gotten so broken down that literally, after they ask me, what can we infer from this? What can we learn from this? What can we benefit from this information? I begin to answer, and this one immediately starts trying to cut me off and say, okay, all right, we get it.
It's beneficial. We get it. We understand that.
Do you understand what it means to just agree for the purpose of the argument? So we're going to agree for the purpose of the argument that a vegan diet, let's call it a vegan diet, is beneficial. But what Kelly's question is what does logic tell us about what we can infer from the 2 points you raised? A, you believe that God instructed us to have a vegan diet, and B, we have discovered, for the purposes of this argument, that a vegan diet is medically beneficial. What can we infer from that?
Some people or most people.
Right. Whatever it may be. Let's give you all the toys to play with, as J. Mike would say. What does that tell us? What can we conclude from that?
One more time, what a ghastly, pitiful, cowardly attempt at just putting the track shoes on and running. These bold-faced, lying children. And in all honesty, watching this call once more, I truly have to give myself a round of applause when it comes to the patience I have had with these clowns. And the other 2 clowns I spoke to the previous week, Armin and Elliot, which the rebuttals that they tried to run from were sent not just over to the quote atheist experience email address on file, but also Armin's quote atheist republic. So here, though I know it would be a delicate subject for them, I move on to very kindly state that a past colleague of the quote atheist experience has just recently had to fight some heart problems, which if he, Dillahunty, is hearing this, he should not be a fool and take heed of this literal instruction from God that would actually benefit him, that which is outlined in Genesis 1:29.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I still have
example,
okay.
And please
go ahead.
No problem. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Well, yes, we can. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure.
Excuse me. No problem. And excuse me if I'm bringing up something that you'd rather not. But for example, you used to have a colleague named Dillahunty, which, from what I understand, just went through some hard times.
You know what? He was never my colleague. So, I mean, you're wrong on that. Sorry.
Yeah. I
came along after he was gone, and so did Cross Examiner. So he was neither one of our colleagues.
Yeah, we're on the call now, and when I ask you these questions, and then you divert or pivot to say, "Well, Dillahunty something," like how are we to react to that in any other way other than to assume that you're trying not to answer the question? We're literally, again.
Once more, I immediately answered the question at the beginning of this conversation before they began to run. As we see here, the utter dishonesty in these people.
We're just trying to have a conversation here. So why don't you talk with us, the people who are on the call, and ask us what we believe or what we think could conclude, or tell us what you think we can conclude from the 2 data points you gave us.
Hey, thank you very much. For example, if you have a loved one who is going through any heart problems right now, if they're fighting heart disease, these diets have been literally scientifically proven to turn
again.
So once more, go back through that and ask yourself if these quote atheists are truly experiencing the same reality as you. And me, once more, being so kind, I again begin to answer, this time beginning with the subject of cancer. And these literal idiots In other words, go on to say, wait, tell us what we can learn from it without telling us what we can learn from it. Literally, if you follow or you represent this quote atheist experience, I dare one of your quote champions to come forward if you have such a thing. And whoever has a working neuron left in their brain, if you have been following these people, I'm sure that has become the end of that now.
This is not. I don't think you're listening to us at all. We understand.
Don't understand where the
We
confusion
understand it's good. Okay. Vegan diet is good. It's freaking great for people, right? God in the Bible said you should eat a vegan diet, right? Okay. If you take these two things, what can we learn from having those two things together? Why is it important that both of those things line up? What is the point that you called us about?
Thank you. If you are fighting cancer or a heart disease, then obviously
stop. We don't want to hear about the diet anymore.
As once again, the quote atheist experience is laid waste to by the actual line of Christ. Hallelujah.